There are moments in life where words just fall short. A breakup is one of them. She left. Maybe she said it wasn't working anymore. Maybe it ended in a fight. Or maybe she just slipped away without explanation. But underneath whatever excuse or silence she gave you, there was an expectation. That you'd break. That you'd blow up her phone. That you'd beg. That you'd lose your grip like so many others had before you. She was counting on your reaction. Because that's the game no one talks about. The silent expectation to win emotionally. But this time, you rewrote the script. You didn't chase. You didn't argue. You didn't explain your worth like it was on trial. You simply vanished. And that silence? It was loud. Deafening even. It wasn't a weakness. It wasn't indifference. It was power. Real grounded power. The kind that shakes someone to their core, not because you yelled, but because you didn't need to. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your silence did more than any apology, paragraph, or plea ever could. Because in her world, you didn't just disappear. You became unforgettable. Kindly support this channel. By liking this video and subscribing, you're not just boosting a number. You're helping bring real conversations to men who feel broken, confused, and emotionally played. You're pushing this message out into the hands of those who need it most, guys who are tired of giving everything only to end up feeling like nothing. And in return, I'll keep showing up. With truth. With tools. With raw, unfiltered insight that doesn't just speak to your situation, but helps you shift your mindset for good. This isn't just another video. This is a turning point. One that begins with awareness and ends with a stronger version of you. Stay locked in. Now let's talk about silence. The kind that doesn't scream but shakes everything to the core. When a relationship ends, most people brace for the noise. The arguments. The desperate texts. The please don't go moments. That's the usual playbook, and most men follow it. They break down. They send long paragraphs. They try to rewrite the ending she already finalized. But here's the hidden truth. Even if she walked away, even if she said she was done, even if she swore she didn't care, she expected a reaction. A sign. Something to prove she still held emotional weight in your life. That her absence had power. That she mattered. Because to the ego, your pain is her validation. Your heartbreak becomes her trophy. Look how much he cared, he couldn't let me go. But then you broke the pattern. You didn't chase. You didn't argue. You didn't beg. You gave her something far more unsettling, your silence. And suddenly, everything she believed about herself in your story begins to unravel. That silence? It doesn't make her feel strong. It makes her feel unsure, confused, lost. She can't label you as obsessive, you didn't pursue. She can't say you were toxic, you didn't fight. She can't paint you as immature, you didn't even flinch. And most painfully for her, she's no longer the center of your universe. Because the second you chose silence, the narrative shifted. It stopped being about her. It became about you. Your silence puts her somewhere she never expected to be, completely out of control. No reaction, no drama, no emotional advantage to play with. She's used to men cracking under pressure. She's used to the crying, the mile-long texts, the desperate need for closure. That familiar dance of pain she's seen before. But this time, you didn't play the part. You gave her nothing. Not even an ending. And that's what unsettles her the most. Because what truly bruises the ego isn't a dramatic goodbye, it's the absence of one. Now she's left to sit with a decision she thought she could walk away from clean. But your silence lingers. It doesn't shout. It echoes, in the quiet moments, in the scroll through her messages, in the empty notifications that never light up with your name. She might be smiling for the camera, laughing at brunch, posting like life hasn't skipped a beat. But inside, that silence starts to grow teeth. The question creeps in slowly. Why hasn't he said anything? That stillness? It turns into a mirror. And suddenly she's forced to look at things she spent years avoiding. Without your validation, she's stuck searching for her own. Without your attention, she's left with the thoughts she tried to bury. First, it's harmless. Maybe he's just giving me time. Then it gets a little heavier. Maybe he's really over it. And finally, the gut punch. Maybe I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Her confidence begins to crack. Her certainty starts to blur. And the ego, that once fed off your availability, it begins to shrink under the weight of your absence. And the wildest part of it all? You didn't make a scene. You didn't lash out. You didn't throw shade online or chase closure. You simply walked away, calmly, quietly, intentionally. And that was the last thing she expected. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not because you shouted, not because you begged, but because you left without a word. See, the world tends to remember the loud exits, the drama, the scenes, the final blowouts, but it obsesses over the ones who vanished in silence. And not out of weakness, but out of power. Your silence didn't scream. It didn't argue. It didn't chase validation. It simply said everything without saying a thing. It told her you were done proving, that you were done auditioning for a role in her life, that you no longer needed her to decide your value. And that quiet, that calm, controlled, grounded quiet, it hit harder than any goodbye ever could, because it wasn't just silence. It was self-respect. It was dignity. It was the final chapter you closed on your own terms. And that's what shook her, because she had no control over it. No reaction to twist. No words to spin. Your silence became the most devastating answer, the one she never saw coming. Now here's the trap most men don't see until it's too late. Predictability. It's the slow killer of attraction. At first, she loved your consistency, your loyalty, the way you always showed up. But when every move became expected, when your kindness turned into a routine she could manipulate, when she pulled away and you leaned in harder every single time, that wasn't love to her anymore. It became background noise. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were always there. No mystery, no boundaries, no tension. She knew you'd text the second she got quiet. She knew forgiveness was automatic no matter the offense. She knew pulling away only brought you closer. And in her mind, all that certainty, it turned value into predictability. What most men miss is this. Comfort is not the same as respect. Because while comfort is nice, respect requires contrast. It requires boundaries. It requires the risk of losing you. Without that risk, she doesn't cherish your presence. She expects it. She takes it for granted. And when that happens, what once drew her in starts to slowly push her away. A woman can feel completely safe with you and still lose interest. She can feel emotionally supported, cherished even, yet still not see you as the man she desires long-term. Because attraction doesn't survive in comfort alone. It needs space. It needs a little uncertainty, a spark of mystery. When she knows exactly what you'll say, exactly how you'll react, your emotions stop hitting with weight. They become background noise, predictable, easy to tune out. And the second she stops wondering about you, she stops thinking about you. Not out of spite, not because she stopped caring, but because there's nothing left to discover. You've become a solved equation, a movie with no twist, a song she's heard 100 times. But here's where things shift. When you break that rhythm, when you stop showing up in the way she expects, it jolts her attention. You don't call after the fight. You don't reply to that 1 a.m. "you up?" text. You don't bite the bait when she posts that story just to see if you'll react. Suddenly the script changes. And in that silence, something lights up inside her. Because now you're not predictable. You're not a comfort blanket. You're not the guy who always gives in. You're a question mark. And the human mind? It can't resist a question it doesn't have the answer to. Let's be clear, being unpredictable isn't about playing games. It's about breaking free from emotional patterns that hand your power away. It's about standing in your own peace so solid that you don't react just because she expects it. It's about letting her feel your absence, not as punishment but as proof that you don't exist on call. Because when you're always chasing, always replying, always reacting, she's holding the strings. She decides how the story goes. But the moment you pull back and don't return like you used to, everything flips. Now she's the one wondering. She's the one checking your page. She's the one replaying the moments in her head, trying to figure out where she stands. And in that shift, something deeper takes root: respect. Not because you turned cold, but because you chose to move with intention. When she realizes she doesn't quite have you figured out, that's when the spark returns. That's when her curiosity kicks in again. Because while predictability might feel comforting, it doesn't light a fire. It doesn't create passion. It doesn't leave a lasting mark. Comfort is nice, but it's not unforgettable. If you want to be respected, remembered, and desired even after the moment has passed, you need to value your own unpredictability. You become the man who doesn't always pick up when she needs a shoulder. You don't flinch when your silence gets misread. You're not afraid of being misunderstood. And even if she'll never admit it out loud, the moment you stop being the open book she once skimmed through so easily is the moment she started reading you all over again. Not because you became someone new, but because you stopped performing. You stopped trading your soul for attention. You stopped begging to be seen. And the moment you broke that pattern, something clicked. You didn't just regain her respect. You became unforgettable. Because mystery? It feeds obsession. The mind hates not knowing. We're wired to close loops, to finish stories, to make sense of things, especially when emotions are involved. It's how we feel safe. It's how we sleep at night. But when you leave no explanation, no final message, no dramatic goodbye, no pattern she can decode, her brain scrambles to fill in the blanks. And that is where the obsession begins. You didn't chase. You didn't argue. You didn't beg for clarity. You didn't post anything to suggest you were broken or thriving. You just disappeared, with peace, with purpose, with silence. No updates, no sad quotes. No vague song lyrics about heartbreak. And that's what haunts her. Not what you said, but everything you chose not to say. You disappeared like a whisper in the wind. And in the quiet you left behind, something began to grow. Not closure, but curiosity. At first, she imagines you hurting. That's the image that makes sense to her. It's what she expected, what she almost needed, to feel like she still mattered. That somewhere you were missing her, mourning her, struggling without her. But when there's nothing, no trace of pain, no subtle cries for attention, no emotional crumbs left behind, her mind starts to shift. Now she pictures something else entirely. She sees you grounded, focused, alive. She imagines you smiling in places she's never been, laughing with people she's never met, doing things she didn't think you could ever do without her. And that thought? It stings because if you're doing just fine, maybe even better, without her, then what does that say about her role in your life? That version of you, the one she can't predict, can't watch, can't control, is haunting. Because it's not just silence anymore. It's a question she can't answer. And that kind of mystery? It doesn't fade. It intensifies. See, mystery doesn't just attract, it hooks. And the longer you stay quiet, the deeper the grip becomes. Each day you don't show up, the image of you becomes more vivid in her mind, and less tied to reality. Now she's not thinking logically. She's thinking emotionally. She's fueled by what-ifs, by memories she didn't realize she'd revisit, by fears she thought she buried. And when emotion, memory, and fear come together, they don't just make her curious. They make her obsessed. Because what she knows about you, it's no longer enough. She wants access again, not because she suddenly knows how to love you right, but because the version of you she can't reach is more powerful than the version she once had right in front of her. The beauty of this mystery is that you didn't force it. You didn't fake distance. You didn't play clever mind games to make her guess. You simply stepped back. Quietly. Fully. Completely. You stopped justifying yourself. You stopped seeking validation. You stopped trying to be seen. And in that quiet withdrawal, you became unforgettable, because while every other man gave her noise, gave her tension, gave her a reason to move on, you gave her silence. And that silence? It lingered. It echoed. It made her remember. Obsess and then replay. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you post your pain, when you try to show someone what they've lost, they don't feel remorse. They feel power. It tells them they still hold space in your emotions, that they're still in control. But when you say nothing, when you leave no clues, no stories, no signs of suffering, that's when they feel powerless. And that powerlessness becomes a question they can't shake. A question that grows louder with every day you stay silent. You didn't just disappear. You became a riddle she can't solve. A presence she can't predict. And the mind? It hates unfinished puzzles. So it spirals, it replays. It searches for answers in old texts, old photos, old memories she once shrugged off. Because now, those memories are all she has. There's no new you to track, only the echo of who you were. And that echo? It loops in her head over and over. Not because you're shouting, but because you're nowhere to be found. And here's the twist, the version of you she's picturing now? It's likely better than the real thing. Because her mind builds a version of you that's untouchable, calm, attractive, thriving, wanted, and completely out of reach. That image of you that now lives in her mind? It's not real, it's a fantasy she created in your silence. And that version? It's far more powerful than anything you could have said to her face. because it wasn't shaped by your words, it was born from her imagination. And people rarely walk away from the stories they invent themselves. That space you created didn't just create distance, it created weight. Before you pulled back, you were always there. Always emotionally present. Always on call, no matter the hour, no matter her mood. You answered when she reached out. You replied even when her messages were laced with attitude. You explained yourself again and again, hoping she'd understand. Your love wasn't a mystery, it was visible. Your loyalty wasn't quiet, it was loud. Your pain wasn't hidden, it was soft, easy for her to see. And even if she didn't say it out loud, she relied on that version of you. She knew she could act cold, distant, unpredictable, and still you'd be there. Like a lighthouse, always steady, always shining. And because she never had to earn your presence, she never felt the need to match it. But then something changed. Not all at once. Quietly. Gradually. You didn't explode. You didn't beg. You didn't disappear in a dramatic exit. You just stopped showing up the way she expected. No more immediate replies. No more careful explanations. No more emotional comfort on command. You didn't vanish physically, but your energy? It left the room. The warmth in your messages? Gone. The depth in your attention? Missing. At first, she couldn't explain it. But she felt it. The space between you wasn't just growing, it was shifting. And where there was once certainty, now there was confusion. That's always the first sign of emotional distance. Not anger, not silence, confusion. Because emotional distance isn't cruelty. It's intentional. It's the quiet act of pulling back your energy from someone who never gave theirs in return. And when you do that, when you stop being the emotional safety net she leaned on without gratitude, everything she once ignored becomes crystal clear. You don't react the way she wants. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't mold yourself around her chaos. You're no longer the emotionally available man trying to hold it all together. And that silence, that quiet detachment, it hits harder than any argument ever could. Because to her, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like gravity. She starts to feel your absence in ways she can't explain. She checks her phone, no message from you. She opens her apps, hoping for something. A text. A reaction. A sign. But there's nothing. No, hope you're okay. No, just thinking about you. Not even a simple take care. And that emptiness? It hits harder than she imagined. Because now she sees what your presence actually meant. You weren't just someone in her life. You were her emotional anchor. Her safety net. The quiet reassurance that no matter how messy things got, you'd still be there. Even when she didn't know how to love you back properly. But now, you're gone. Not with anger. Not with a scene. Just gone. You're no longer orbiting her world. No longer feeding her emotions with your attention. You've stepped out of reach, and you're not looking back. And the scariest part for her? You're not waiting. You're not hoping. You're not proving anything. You just took your energy back. And that truth? It cuts deep. Because emotional distance doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't fight, it fades. And once that withdrawal is complete, there's no denying it. She might act unbothered. Post like she's thriving. Laugh louder, smile harder, pretend your silence is nothing. But beneath it all, there's weight. Heavy, silent, growing weight. Because even when things were tense, she knew you'd show up. Even in conflict, she trusted you'd come back around. But now, there's no pattern. No signal, no playbook. And that forces her to sit with herself. Her choices, her ego, her silence. And in that quiet space, regret starts to rise. Not just regret for losing you, but for never valuing you when you were still trying. Because the silence you gave her wasn't meant to punish. It was meant to protect, to heal you. She just never thought your peace would be found in the very distance she always took for granted. That your strength would rise in the very silence she thought would break you. That's what caught her off guard. She believed you needed her approval to feel worthy. That without her attention you'd crumble. But now she sees it clearly. You never needed her to validate you. You only thought you did because you were too emotionally close. And when you're too close, the lines get blurry. You start mistaking love for self-sacrifice. You start believing that giving more will fix what's not being returned. But now you know better. Love without effort from both sides isn't love, it's silent self-abandonment. And sacrifice that goes unnoticed always turns into resentment. So you stopped giving what was never appreciated. You stopped showing up where you were only tolerated. You stopped explaining your heart to someone who mistook your presence for weakness. And that shift, that calm, unapologetic silence, it's louder than any words you could have said. Because when distance is real, genuine, not performative, it signals something final. It says, I've let go, without ever needing to speak. And once a man releases not out of hurt but from deep self-respect, he never returns to who he was. She feels that. She senses it. It weighs on her even if she won't admit it. You didn't go quiet to make her feel guilty. You didn't pull away to make her miss you. You stayed silent because something inside you changed. Not in reaction to her, but in alignment with yourself. You reached a point. And on the other side of that point stood a man who no longer needed to chase love just to feel whole. This silence? It wasn't strategy. It was your moment of truth. The first time you chose yourself not out of ego but out of clarity. Because you finally understood, giving your all to someone who can't see your worth is the quickest way to forget who you are. So you stopped, not because you were tired, not because you were weak, but because, for the first time you truly understood, you had nothing left to prove. That's where everything changed. Because when a man stops trying to explain himself, when he no longer seeks to be understood by someone who never really listened in the first place, that's when he steps into his freedom. The freedom of not needing to be chosen. The freedom of not needing to be validated. And that silence? It wasn't emptiness. It was full of strength, full of clarity, full of quiet self-respect. You stopped performing. You stopped chasing a role in someone else's life where you were only ever treated like background noise. And in that calm withdrawal, you didn't just step back. You stepped into a new version of yourself. A version that's composed, steady, grounded. This silence isn't cold, it's composed. It's not created out of fear, it's built from wisdom. You no longer read her indifference like a puzzle. You no longer see mixed signals as invitations. You no longer confuse inconsistency with love. Because your love has evolved. It's no longer something to be thrown into chaos hoping to be seen. It's selective now. Rooted in peace, not pursuit. Presence, not proving. You've stopped chasing connection. And started attracting alignment. And that kind of inner shift, it can't be undone. Not by her words. Not by her regret. Not even by the memories you once held so close. Because the man you were, the one who needed answers, who needed closure, who needed to feel chosen, he's gone. She might come back. She might reach out, send a message, test the waters just to see if you'll still swim. But the truth? You're no longer standing where she left you. She's not coming back to the man she left behind. That man was still trying to earn his worth. Still hoping to be seen, to be chosen. But now, he doesn't need to prove anything. This version of you doesn't wait for permission to move forward. You don't need her validation to feel enough. You don't need her affection to feel complete. You found peace. And peace isn't something you gamble with uncertainty. When you went quiet, it wasn't to disappear, it was to reflect. You became a mirror, not a voice begging to be heard. You stopped putting your pain on display. You turned inward. And you asked yourself the questions that hurt. Why fight for someone who wouldn't fight for me? Why show up for someone who only showed up when it suited them? Why give everything to someone who made me feel like I was asking for too much? And in that silence, you didn't just find answers. You found freedom. There comes a moment in a man's life when he stops looking outward for worth and starts measuring it by how well he honors himself. That's who you are now. You don't raise your voice to be noticed. You don't drop your standards to fit in. You don't pour your energy into hands that never held it with care. And a man like that? He doesn't just walk away. He leaves something behind. Because when silence comes from strength, it echoes, it lingers, it makes people pause. Your silence didn't push her away. It made her face the truth. You weren't just another name in her story. You were the chapter she never thought would end. Until it did, and this time you're not coming back. That's the shift in power. And once you step into this version of yourself, there's no turning back. You didn't send paragraphs. You didn't beg to be heard. You didn't make noise. You just walked away calm, clear, and strong. Now your silence sits in her mind like a shadow she can't outrun. She expected you to fall apart, you didn't. She thought you'd chase. You never did. And now, she finally sees it, what was always there, your worth. This was never about revenge. Never about proving a point. It was about choosing yourself in a world that kept asking you to forget who you are. It was about realizing your energy is earned, not owed. And when you stopped speaking, that's when the world started listening. If this message hit home, support the channel. Not just with a like, but with purpose. Comment, unstoppable, if you felt this to your core. I can subscribe. Share it with one brother who needs to hear it. Because silence isn't the end. It's the start of everything real.